we are going to be talking about conduct disorder. And I want to emphasize that this is always going to, our lunch and learns are aimed to be introduction to. We try not to go so clinical about it because we want to equip the community to feel like they're able to recognize it, have enough information that's not intimidating. And we never want to approach it in a way where we feel like you guys have the threshold of diagnosing or identified in a way that now you're starting to label other people. This is all about that education, understanding it further. If it's something that impacts you, how to be able to communicate it to other. If you see a loved one that's been impacted by this disorder or could be or has been in the talks of, then that way you understand it a little bit better. Instead of being scared of talking about the disorder, then you're equipped to have a more educated approach to it. And that's what we aim to do. It's to train the community to have healthier conversations around the specific disorder and any disorder, any mental health concepts and mental health overall. My name is Mariana, and I often present this Lunch and Learns. I'm a community education coordinator. If it's not myself, it'll be my colleague, Carolina Vargas, who will also she will be hosting next month's Lunch and Learn because we do these monthly, and there's sometimes different mental health disorders we go over, or maybe every one that we've touched on previous months, but usually we try to keep it up to date and change it around so we can provide you with more just content and information. Just to give you an idea how things will be run, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are. I saw that we have a few returning participants and also some new faces. So I'll give you a little glimpse of who we are, what we do. Today, we will be talking about conduct disorder, introduction to. And the next topic that we'll be covering up next month on August 3rd is going to be introduction to bullying. And that will be led by Carolina. So we'll be excited, especially getting so close to the school year. These next couple of topics are going to be great for the childhood, the school system as school starts back up. At the end, we will always leave room for questions, allow you to be able to stay connected with our resources, with our social media outlets. And also, we greatly appreciate your survey feedback because that really shapes the way that we present, how we create the presentations, and what information we want to make sure we highlight depending on your feedback. So make sure, and that's towards the end of the presentation. Once I end the Zoom meeting, it'll pop up on your screen to ask if you would like to be taken to a different window so you can complete that survey, or you can also access it after our email follow-up. So those are a few options. Okay. Lastly, before we start on our topic, we are the Hope and Healing Center and Institute. Gateway to Hope, it's the training branch of the Hope and Healing Center, and we're very community driven. How can we equip the community to have this knowledge, this information, to have better conversations and responses to mental health? We always have other departments, like we have CARES team that focus heavily on not only grief, but also end of life care, have great resources. We have a clinical team, and they're always doing research all around. So feel free to take a look at the Hope and Healing Center also if you just need to expand your resources around mental health and some services on some research too. Again, I want to emphasize that the goal of these Lunch and Learns is to educate you, create more awareness, allow it to be a conversation that's not intimidating so that we can address the stigma, and also provide you and equip you with tools to respond to those in mental health distress. Usually our formula is we kind of go with our 4 R's method. That means the way that we put together information is so you can recognize a mental health disorder. In this case, how can you recognize a conduct disorder? How can you refer to a mental health professional knowing that this could be the specific disorder you're trying to target? How can you relate to those in distress? Maybe how can you relate to those that have that diagnosis or have a loved one that is dealing with somebody that has been diagnosed or could be diagnosed with mental health, with conduct disorder? And then how can we restore through the community? We have a holistic approach. And even though we have a lot of trainings that are secular, we also have faith-based trainings. So we always want to emphasize the importance of how can the community come together to bring a resilient community. Okay, so let's touch on how can we recognize conduct disorder. Let's begin by first understanding that conduct disorder is within the spectrum of the disruptive conduct disorder, kind of diagnosed in the DSM-5. It's a lot of information, but this is a couple of different levels of this disorder that are on the disruptive conduct disorder. The first one that you might be exposed to over here is going to be intermittent explosive disorder. Usually this one's a periodic outburst of anger, tantrum. They might be sometimes violent, but it's not as severe as conduct disorder, which that's going to be the one we're going to focus on today. And when it comes to oppositional defiant disorder, this one's the opposition or kind of that defiance with authority. One thing that while putting this presentation together that I've learned with oppositional defiant disorder, it's clinicians and studies and research have shown that this behavior, it's a lot more dominant or present in the home. So they tend to have that, be more comfortable with showing that defiant with authority in a home base. Of course, that's not to say that they will also have that in the school or maybe a park they frequent often, but it tends to be some of the symptoms when it comes to oppositional defiant disorder tends to be at a higher level within the home base. Which I thought that was a really interesting information. But again, the oppositional defiant, it's more towards being defined with authority, a lot of anger, temper tantrums. That word always gets stuck. But when we focus around conduct disorder, the biggest thing to take away with conduct disorder, it is the most severe of the spectrum of the disruptive conduct disorder field. And that one's going to show a lot of more, not only violence, but it's going to have a little bit more of defying of the rights of others, the rights of property. So I'll touch base on what the symptoms kind of look like, but understand that that is the more severe level of the disorder. And we'll talk about some of the symptoms. So what is the definition? The definition is, it is the most common disruptive behavior disorder, which is a repetitive and persistent pattern of behaviors in which the basic rights of others or major age-appropriate societal norms or rules are violated. This one's really defined with rules. There's almost not a lot of empathy around their actions. That destructive behavior of the intent to cause harm, the intent to destroy has to be present in order to really gauge into the marker of conduct disorder. We're going to focus a lot more of the children. This is going to be a little bite size of information, but when we focus on conduct disorder, it is more frequently seen in children's, and when clinicians diagnose it, they diagnose it for age 18 and under. That tends to be the age group of people that are diagnosed with this conduct disorder. Commonly in children's, they tend to display low self-esteem. They throw a lot of frequent tantrums. They have a lot of that insecure approach to their behavior. Unable to see how their behavior hurts other. That's again going back to the inability to feel empathetic towards others. They lack empathy and little remorse about hurting others. So they both have that lack of awareness that they hurt others and that lack of feeling remorse. And a lot of the times, the reason why they behave this way is because they perceive other people's behavior to equate to the way that they're going to respond to it. So what I mean by that is they might perceive somebody to be rude to them. They might perceive them to be irritable towards them, which in their brain, they register as I'm allowed to then respond this way or the other. So they have that lack of awareness, not only with its behavior, but they're not correctly coding the way that people are intending to have in their communication. They tend to kind of put it into the spectrum of the defense. They are irritable about me, and it's that back into that low self-esteem. They're in defense mode. But a lot of it also comes from the lack of awareness and the lack of a feeling of remorse. Okay. Oh, let's see. People joining in. When I list the next couple of symptoms, so that way it can give you a guide on how to recognize this behavior. We also categorize it under 4 different general symptoms. One of the categories is going to be aggressive behavior. This is the symptom that's present that causes physical harm. This is bullying, maybe initiating fights. The destructive behavior, which is now they have the intent of causing a destruction to a property, maybe setting things on fire. And the deceitful behavior, this is lying, maybe lying to even get things that would benefit them, maybe to get them advantage, that manipulation, but they also participate a lot in the lying component of the symptoms. And violation of rules. This is defying rules, especially when it's being told not only by authority, but maybe the structure of the home. If parents had rules at the house, maybe they're defying against those rules. So it could be in the spectrum of not only law, the rules that are set by the law, by the city, by the state, the norms, but also within the household, in school-based too. So let's look at some of the symptoms. It's very important to understand that when we talk about conduct disorder, a lot of people want to say, well, they're just having bad behaviors. Maybe that's a reason to look into conduct disorder. It's way more than that. It's way more severe than just having a bad attitude, having an isolated situation or isolated moments of causing a fight, isolated moment of maybe going shoplifting. It has to have a persistent approach to it, like we mentioned earlier. And not only that, but it also has to have 3 of the next 15 lists that I'm about to list, and they have to be present in the last 12 months, and one of them must be present in at least 6 months. This is when we are, instead of jumping the gun and saying, you have conduct disorder, understand there's a lot of kind of fields or meters and markers that somebody needs to have present in order for this to be a diagnosis. And the reason why I am emphasizing so much on that is in the community, there is a large fear of the diagnosis, not only with conduct disorder, but in a number of other disorders, because we're so quick to jump into that label, but there's a lot of more awareness and education that we can do as a community to understand what will take to get to that threshold. Some of it just needs other type of approach, maybe preventative care, preventative approach, preventative education tools, before it even gets to the point of a diagnosis. And that's still a very wealth of information to have a hold of. So let's look at some of the examples. One of the examples of the symptom is they often bullies, threatens, or intimidates other. They're always initiating this, and it's a repetitive pattern. They're repetitive bullying others. It's not only an isolated instance of having bad blood with one of the students. It's a constant behavior, constant need to threaten, and that's where they cross the line of now they're violating the rights of this individuals, their safety, their well-being. So it is, again, and they're usually the ones initiating it. Often initiates physical fights. That's back to that physical component of their behaviors and wanting to cause harm. Has used a weapon that can cause serious physical harms to others. This could be using a bat for initiating a fight. They could use bricks, maybe using their own cars with little empathy of how it could hurt the other person. There's that meter of not having that awareness of consequences or lack of empathy is a huge marker for when we look at conduct disorder. Has been physically cruel to people and has been physically cruel to animals. When we talked about the other 2 disorders that we mentioned before conduct disorder, This is not present for the intermittent and the oppositional defiant disorder. The cruelty towards people and cruelty to animals, usually it's a marker for conduct disorder, which again goes back to the reason why it can be on the spectrum of being a more severe type. It's like some of the other symptoms is they have stolen while confronting a victim. They're sad whenever they go out and do the stealing or the shoplifting. There's no remorse in hurting somebody while they're on their way out, pushing them, shoving them. They tend to be more of a reaction to stealing, instead of somebody that has a little bit more empathy and they just go and steal and try to avoid any collateral damage, if you will. They have no problem in also confronting or shoving or causing additional harm. Has forced someone into sexual activities, has deliberately engaged in fire setting with the intention of causing serious damage. They also have deliberately destroyed other properties. And again, the big marker is that they have to be that intention. When we look at the other ones, they might have thrown a tantrum and then accidentally broken something, or same vice versa. Maybe a great example was vandalism. If somebody is just vandalism, but they're not trying to hurt other people or hurt the property or cause that damage, it's more of a statement. Then the second that there is intention to cause serious damage, that's when we would register as something that could be a symptom of conduct disorder. So again, that intention of causing serious damage has to be present. Has broken into someone else's house, building, or car. The last 5 of the symptoms are often lies to obtain goods or favors to avoid obligation, has stolen items of value without a victim. So there hasn't need to be a victim in present. They can just take place in shoplifting or stealing. Often stays out at night despite the parents not allowing it. Has run away from home overnight at least twice while living with the parents, or once if they haven't returned for a long time. This goes back with, it's not, when we talk about running away, it's not that they're running away because their home structure it's bad, because they're trying to run away from a abusive situation. It's because they are trying to define the rules. Their parents said no, so now they're going to go regardless of that law or of that expectation from their parents. But it's very important when disclosing the individual that's being kind of reviewed or assessed. Could be, I'm running away because there was a fight in my family and it just felt like an unsafe space. That wouldn't quite follow into what this statement says. They have to go because their parent just simply has that rule and they're trying to define the rules within the home base. If I can clarify, feel free to let me know. But just to make that clear, if it's not running away because their household is unsafe, they're running away to define the rules of the house. Often skip schools began before 13 years old. When it comes to conduct disorder, a lot of the times these behaviors come before the age of 10. When it comes to diagnosing, it tends to be under the age of 18, but a lot of these behaviors tend to be present at late childhood and early teen years. So whenever we talk about skipping school, it's not something that happens after 13 years old for it to be a higher risk of a marker for somebody, but it is skipping school before the age of 13. That would be a huge marker of the symptoms. Perfect. So that's a little bit about recognizing, knowing the threshold, the expectation, the line. Now let's look at how can we refer. Once we've recognized that these behaviors are present in somebody, in ourselves or in somebody we care for, how can we get them help? Understand the statistics. It affects between 2% and 10% of children in adolescence in the United States. And as I mentioned, a lot of the symptoms are more present in late childhood under 10 or early teen years. It is more dominant in boys than with girls. And that's just some of the statistics to throw out there for you guys. What are some contributing factors to somebody that has conduct disorder? There's a lot of research, just like any other mental health disorders. We're constantly learning something new about it. There's certain markers that we take in account for. And when it comes to conduct disorder, trauma background is a big indicator. A lot of them have had an abusive upbringing, neglect. Maybe they've also witnessed this. That's where environmental factor comes in. Maybe they're in a community where there's a lot of violence, a lot of neglect within the childhood. Maybe the needs aren't being met. We also take in consideration the genetics and the family history. You are not necessarily going to be automatically going to be diagnosed with the mental health disorders, but that just puts you at a higher risk if your family has had a mental health history, if genetically wise too, if there's that predisposition for having a mental health illness. That's all factors into what can contribute to being diagnosed with conduct disorder. When it comes to brain structure, this is more of the newer research, and even though the brain wouldn't be factored into the diagnosing process, it is something to keep in mind. Your brain is constantly being in charge of a lot of emotions, how you register, how you fight or flight. And then specifically in this one, amygdala plays a big role in your perception of authority, your behavior. So when it comes to brain structure, studies have shown that if it's injured or there's some aspects that or low IQ, that sometimes can be factored into getting closer to that threshold of being diagnosed with conduct disorder. Some of the mental health providers, we always like having this slide present so that people understand how to navigate the mental health system. But when you look into who should I refer out as a mental health provider, we have primary care doctors. This one's a great first step because you want to take a physical exam, seeing if there's a physical reason to why people or the individual is having tantrums, maybe irritability. If there's a physical reason, then you could address it as such. If the physician is unable to find a physical reason to them, their behavior, their conduct, or XYZ, then they would then refer it out to a mental health professional in order to understand a little bit more of why is this happening and what's the root cause of the behavior. The best one specifically for this one, even though you can't count on any mental health professional to be able to be a starter point of care, you could have psychologists and psychiatrists. The thing with psychologists, they're able to really narrate the childhood component of it all. They have that added layer of education to see and study the childhood timeline, behaviors, as have different assessments. But there's also other counselors that are able to use CBT, which I'll talk in a little bit, in order to rewire behavior or use behavior modifications to still be an impactful treatment for the individuals. Psychiatrists are also great at being able to refer out and use that medical component to understand the behavior also. When it comes to treatment, there's a couple of options. We talk about psychotherapy, CBT. CBT allows the individual to really understand how they can navigate their anger, their intrusive thoughts, or that urge of doing something, whether it's destroying a building, being defiant with the law. All of these behaviors can bring the CBT can bring awareness to those components. Anger management, again, that's rewiring what your anger is towards, those feelings, how to identify feelings, how to identify what triggers you, and what is a healthier alternative to dealing with those feelings, to dealing with that stress, dealing with those feelings that are uprising and triggering moments. Family therapy. The great thing about family therapy is that it helps the family communicate with each other, helps the family be equipped with the tools to have a better understanding about what's happening, better understanding of tools and how to apply them. Something like positive reinforcement versus feeding into the negative reinforcements can be not only helpful for the individual, but also as a family, so it can be reinforced even farther. School-based intervention, when the school, if this is being identified early on in children, then we want to have the second place that they spend the most time on to also have some tools in order to deal with those conduct challenges in the individual. So having school-based interventions could be a very helpful treatment for the individual. Medication, I put an asterisk in this one because it is the last resort, and usually the reason why it's up there is because it's now dealing with if other diagnosis comes in play. Maybe if they have ADHD, or if they've been also diagnosed with ADHD, or also depression or anxiety. So that's when medication comes into play, but highlight only general physicians and psychiatrists, and in only in, I think, 4 states can psychologists prescribe medicine. So make sure that medication is being discussed with the correct providers. Anybody that hasn't had that background cannot be suggesting or prescribing that. So keep that in mind, but that's an asterisk. Usually when it comes to conduct disorder, that's not the treatment option that they will often resort to, but it is not discarded. And then lastly, parent management training. What parent management training does, it focuses again on the behavior modification of the individual and also the parents, because they're able to break patterns that reinforce negative behavior. And instead of reinforcing negative behaviors, they're teaching parents to reinforce positive behaviors, awareness around positive and negative behaviors, and monitor and measure the progress and goals of the treatment. Sometimes it can feel so hopeless. My kid is being defiant, my kid is not listening to me. As a parent, as even a school system, that can be very draining. So being able to have this type of trainings and giving you better tools, better understanding of what's available out there in order for you to deal with the tantrums, maybe the defiance of the individual, the child, it can help you just manage it better. And again, one of the things that I found fascinating when it came to learning about conduct disorder is you can still implement the punishments, you can still implement the consequences, but it is all how you approach it. How are you going to introduce this punishment? Is it going to be yelling and yelling? And then now that's really feeding into the negative behavior. But if you have a positive kind of approach to it, you can still get the goal of seeing that there's consequences without having to feed into 2 people fighting, the parent having low patience, the parent or the school system or the teacher, whoever is being responsive to the behavior. The more empathetic approach, the better the result will be in executing that behavior correction or the punishment, or even redirecting the behavior. You want to take in mind that if left untreated, it increases the risk of developing other mental health disorders as an adult. When it comes to conduct disorder, it either is something that it doesn't bother the individual because there's very little lack awareness of what they're doing is wrong. It bothers more the people around them than it does them in hindsight, in theory. So when it comes to treatment and getting diagnosed and seeking treatment, the individual is not the first one to want to seek that treatment. And then as a family, there's a lot of stigma around it. So it goes a long time without being treated. A lot in adulthood, instead of being treated as conduct disorder, sometimes it is more seen under the radar of antisocial personality disorder. So keep that in mind. It increases the risk of substance abuse, kind of dealing with the consequences with the fractured relationships, that as with friends, with family, that they resort to substance, and they can then have that risk of substance abuse. Increase the risk of school-related problems, skipping, getting expelled, not having great relationships with the teachers. It increases that friction, and increase the risk of legal problems. A lot of times, if it's left untreated, they end up in jail, they end up in juvie, they end up in a lot more legal problems if left untreated. When we come to early intervention, it helps with the risk of incarceration, getting them into problems with the law, reduce the risk of mood disorders, and it reduces the risk of substance abuse as a form of them self-medicating. They're being addressed, things are being talked about, and that is always a great thing to have, a great tool to have initiation for a point of care in just seeking help and seeking treatment. We always have here at the Hope and Healing Center, if you ever just need something for somebody or yourself as a supportive community, the Hope Line is always a resource for you. You don't have to be in Houston in order to access it. You can be anywhere I believe we tested out globally, you can also get access, but for sure national in other states. You call this number and it has two purposes. You can call to get more referral. You can let them know, hey, I have a family friend whose kid is potentially showing some symptoms of conduct disorder. Can you refer me to somebody? This is their information. A lot of the questions that they ask, it's just that they can filter out a more meaningful referral for you, whether it's insurance, age, zip code. So they're able to take care of you in that form. I know we have a lot of mental health coaches also present. That is another way to use this line. Let them know I have somebody that has conduct disorder or any other disorder that we might discover or discuss here in our Lunch and Learns, or that is more impactful to your situation. You can let them know, this is what I'm dealing with. Can you give me some referrals based on this information? Additionally, the second feature of the Hope Line is to have somebody to talk to. They are trained operators to have peer counseling. And whether you are waiting for your next appointment and you just need somebody to talk to, that's an advantage, a tool that you can take advantage of. Or if you are unable to pay for treatment, but you need somebody to talk to, this is a great tool. And I'll emphasize that this is not a crisis line, this is a warm line. So if venting and talking about it is going to be helpful, use this line, and it is open from 5 to 8. If it's an emergency or if it's a crisis, we always encourage to call 911 or a crisis line. Now let's talk about how can we relate. I talked earlier about the empathetic skills, which I'll actually go into more detail in the next slide. But when we are faced with somebody that does have a conduct disorder, we're being challenged with that inability of them having that empathetic or registering that there's consequences. When a parent yells at a child, or even when we get yelled at, we don't want to get in trouble. We don't want to have repercussions. We don't want to be told the consequences are blank, blank, blank. For somebody that has conduct disorder, that meter of consequences is not as present. They don't have that response of, I don't want to get in trouble, or I don't want to disappoint my parents. There's just that numbness to that response. However, they can react to anger with anger, and it could feed into what I would call fire with fire. So the more nurturing that the parent is, the more they're able to successfully de-escalate a situation, follow through with the punishment without escalating the situation even further. So when you respond with a nurturing response, now understanding the symptoms, understanding the situation better, you're able to be more of a supportive system for them. Make sure that the home has a consistent supportive environment, not a lot of hostility. Trauma is a factor into conduct disorders, so making sure that it's a supportive environment within the home as a safe space for them to be able to successfully go through treatment or whatever is applied to your situation. Balance of discipline and love. Again, you can still follow through with the consequences in a more loving way. And you want to be able to really optimize your empathetic skills. And when we talk about empathetic skills, is remember to see their perspective. And in general, with all mental health disorders, we want to understand that it's not something they will away. It's not something. There's a lot, especially with this conduct disorder. We've seen a lot of neurological components that factor in too. So you want to be able to see their perspective, allow them to speak through and through. Activate your active listening, communicate so that you are able to understand what is happening in the situation. Appreciate them as humans. Understand that at the end of the day, you just want to be spoken with respect, and same vice versa, and understand their feelings. Really optimize the all four elements of empathy to, again, be able to de-escalate the situation, be able to help the individual adopt new ways to deal with their emotions, deal with the symptoms, and that is all going to be able to greatly benefit not only the individual, but the family also. When we talk about reaching out for help, you're only one person, and there's so many blind spots that it have. So whether you're a mental health coach, a family member of somebody that is dealing with the mental health disorder, or as we talk about today with conduct disorder, seek who can help you. Recruit people that you trust to build a healthy support group, your community support groups for yourself or for the individual, and therapy. Talk to a mental health professional so that way they can fully understand what is happening with the individual, the environmental factors of that individual. That's why with these types of lunch and learns, we go a little bit of introduction, because it can be a lot of factors playing into that one individual. So going into therapy can give you that more customizable understanding and answer to what could be happening in your household, and your child, or for yourself too. So always seeking therapy. How can we restore through a supportive community? A strong community. Individuals benefit from having a strong supportive system to deal with life challenges and struggle. Being able to have supportive social interactions with others, even as a family member who has avoided situation in order, especially with conduct disorder. Maybe you're avoiding going to the playground because usually they start fights, or there's a repetitive behavior that you don't want to expose others of, so the family also isolates. So being able to engage in in positive social interactions can greatly benefit the family, the individual, and just the process of healing and finding the best treatment option for the family to find that stability. Teamwork mentality, we're all in it. It's something that the more everyone has their hands in playing a part of the healing process, or the stability of it all, is going to help the family feel like they're not alone. And encouraged by curious resilience in the community. The more we talk about these disorders, the more we talk about other disorders in general, as we understand that this is not something that is disabling in general, but the more we create awareness and education, we know what to do, how to do it, how to be empathetic about it, and find ways to help instead of isolate. And when we see these successful stories, there's other people being able to find normalcy within the diagnosis, it builds a community that has resilience. Psychoeducation. We provide this lunch and learns so that you can learn a little bit more. And I know we could talk longer and longer about this disorder, especially when there's some disorders like conduct disorder that's not spoken about as much, but learning more about it, understanding what works for family, the individuals, and really building up that structure for what best applies for them. As I mentioned earlier, we are a holistic approach, and one of the prayers for July when it comes to mental health is letting them know that if you feel hopeless, you come to know that hope is present. The Hope and Healing Center always drives their everything that we do to show grace and hope, and be able to bring these conversations not only to secular places, but also places of faith, to be able to strengthen that relationship and know that you're not alone in so many ways. So I left this prayer, and the scripture is Psalms 34:17 and 18, if you'd like to take note. Lastly, as I wrap up the presentation, we have our mobile app that's called Mental Health Gateway website, and our website is mentalhealthgateway.com. In our app, you can look it up as Mental Health Gateway. The great thing about the app is just information that's accessible to your fingertips. Currently, there's only when it comes to, as you can see right in the image, PTSD, we only have the 12 most common disorders, but we do have our Lunch and Learns PDFs ready for you. So if this is a topic that you wanted to go back and take notes on, or download or share with other people, they can access that on our app. And as I mentioned, at Gateway to Hope, we are community-driven training approach to the Hope and Healing Center. We're a community training approach to the Hope and Healing Center. So we go out to the community, Carolina and myself go out to the communities and train churches. This is a faith-based training around mental health and empower mental health coach training and support groups, which we have already established the curriculum, and they're all at no cost for the churches. For a school, we have a secular training for empowered training, and that is for facilitators, teachers, and anybody that works with kids. We do not train the children or the students, but we train the leadership staff, faculty, to be able to be more aware of mental health signs. How can they recognize as students in mental health distress, or even within peers. There's also support group training. And for workplace, we have a subscription base, but we have, again, the empowered training in the workplace for companies, support groups, and mental health champion training. So if you're ever interested in that, feel free to reach out to one of us, and we would be happy to give you more information about that. This is our social channels. So if you're happy to learn to understand more, we have a lot of videos, a lot of social media that you can also share within your own platform. But you can follow Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn so that you can stay up to date.